Hi, I'm Matt Wyman, CEO and co-founder of Acario. Acario provides agent simulation. We simulate users to break your agents before your consumers or customers do. Joining me today is Daniele Benardi, CEO and co-founder, or as he likes to describe himself as Chief Vibe Officer, which I love, for Toolhouse. Welcome, Daniele.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's get started by maybe you telling us a little bit about Toolhouse.
Yes, so what's Toolhouse? Toolhouse is the fastest, easiest way to build agents, starting with your own words. So we're breaking the barriers of education or technological hurdles that make people hesitant about building agents and making them run while their laptop is closed. We do this thing and we do it well. We help people build agents and we keep them on while they sleep so they can, have more time with their family, more time growing their business, and we take care of the rest.
Oh wow! So you are building you're building autonomy is what you're building. You're building agents that are getting out into the world. So if that's what you're doing, I'm really curious. What do you think this skill is that people need to embrace and think about and develop if they're going to be ready for this autonomous AI world?
Compassion. Compassion is
Huh.
what you
Tell me
need.
more.
So I bumped into this problem because I saw what AI can look like. AI is this massive tsunami that's going to revolutionize access to jobs, how the economy works. We're already seeing how many entry-level jobs in the US have been killed by AI. And so I kind of put myself in the shoes of students or small business owners that are not going to have the means to upskill themselves into AI. And I was like, if we want AI to be truly a revolution, just like the World Wide Web 40 years ago was, then it needs to be accessible to everybody. And that was the power of the web, really. How do we do that? We need to build something that makes everybody build, everybody. And mean that you don't have to ask permission to the big tech providers to build something. You should build it yourself. You shouldn't go to college to study AI. We'll do it for you. So we make, through compassion, we try to understand what are the implications of AI for everybody and build for everybody. So that's basically why I think human skill is crucial today for AI. And compassion is the only human skill that's also a business skill that you can apply that. Because if you understand through compassion to empathy what are the needs of this future cohort of users that are going to be cut off technology altogether, then you build for them and they will pay you to keep going in their business and probably even grow it.
It's interesting because the the nature of building agents right now, you have to have clarity in what you're trying to build on the other side. Like you have to be able to articulate what you expect that agent to do and or that collection of nodes, how you want to put it together. And it's not just a mechanical process. And so it's interesting. When do you think about compassion, are you also talking about the people who are using who are building those agents have to themselves, not just yourself, not just your team having compassion for your customers to make it accessible, but are you also imagining that the people using Toolhouse also need to sort of up level their empathy and compassion for the people they're trying to work with and the people even further downstream?
I see what you mean. Yeah, they already have that. So when we're talking about our customers, we're talking about companies, startups, enterprises. They're all struggling. So they do have compassion because basically compassion is, in business terms, understanding of your customer, understanding of the customer requirements. I come from a product background as well, and that's basically what we do
All day.
all the day. Yeah, it's you need to understand and be obsessed about what your customer needs, and cater to that. That's compassion. It's just like under a different business jargon, but it's there. People, users, students, anybody who uses the platform and gets to Solaus gets there because they're struggling. And so they already have that the compassion, their business understanding of their customers, and they want to set themselves apart from the competition. They want to do something that's more automated. they want to serve that not 9 to 5, but 24/7. And maybe they want to expand because maybe they're doing something very well. They understand their customers pretty well, and they want to do it in every single part of the world they can potentially
Hmm.
reach. You do that through agents. So that I think it's built in. We just tell our users, hey, we understand you, we get you. You know, it's so hard. Like you want to do this, you want to
It is.
be better at what you do, but there's someone gatekeeping you from making it better. Why? Because it's costly. AI, it's very costly. It's hard to get right, and that it's all a barrier of entry. Like they don't want you to be playing in their same playground, and so they're kicking you out by making AI so hard and accessible.
I think it's fascinating. The you're linking the builder, the product empathy, but you're also saying now everyone has to have this trait. And you had a recent post where you said trust isn't a product, and or maybe it was a conversation you and I actually had previously. But in any case, I love that phrase. It just really stuck with me because those folks do have to have trust, and there is an interesting interplay there with like you do kind of have to have trust in the product, but you're right, trust itself is not a product. So maybe can you talk a bit about that? Because as people, I mean, if you're thinking about that situation, you're building that agent, you're making it autonomous, you're using it to reach out to the world, it's 24/7, your trust level is really high.
That's what I used to do for a living, and that taught me a very good lesson. I used to work at Twitter.
Hmm.
Twitter, I was part of the developer platform, so the Twitter API. Twitter, throughout the years, the API were over 12 years old when I was there. Now it's like over 15. It's going through many iterations. It started with the API being the main uh, building surface for Twitter. Even Twitter itself was built on top of their own API, which was a very good thing to have. That attracted developers in mass, really. And then throughout the years, Twitter needed to be profitable, needed to turn some make investors happy, and they started to add barriers of entry with developers. It means that either you pay or you're out. We're going to remove some endpoints, some APIs because we need people to use only this functionality within the main Twitter app because we need to serve ads and all this kind of stuff. That eroded trust to the point that for like 5-ish years, like 4 or 5 years, we were to a point where we didn't even know what trust was anymore. Developers didn't want to talk to us anymore. They were fearing that we would just like use them for our own advantage. And so my job and the job of obviously the entire team, developer platform, was to restore trust, but also
Oh, interesting.
initially understand what trust means. Trust is very simple. Trust is consistency over time. It's saying that you're going to do something and then you do it. And then you tell people, see, told you, and do it all over again. Once you establish this pattern, people start to follow you again. And so that's what we did. You know, we stopped saying things just to say it, and we started doing things consistently. And that's where developers started to come back to us. So this is a simple way to define trust, consistency over time. And we're seeing the opposite happening in the rest of the ecosystem. Like they do something, especially with community-driven products or developer-driven products. The pattern is the startup launches, you see a ton of stars on GitHub, and then they go enterprise. The community. I won't swear. I won't, but that's a sentiment. I'm an engineer myself, so I understand. Like I feel betrayed every single time. We at Toolhouse, we didn't do that game. We have like probably 4 stars on our GitHub repo, but we never went that way. Instead, we built a massive community on Discord where we actually help people educate themselves on AI. And we basically did the other way around. We started experiencing trust within the community first, and then they started using the product. And that is turning out for the best.
I'm I'm as I think about this, there's another aspect. So here we have these agents. People are just learning to embrace them, both building them and using them on both sides. And of course, there was a few years ago, oh, hallucinations, but now people aren't talking about hallucination quite as much because they're enjoying that creativity. They're harnessing that creativity to get the agents to do interesting things. And here it is exactly what you just described, because as they're asking the agents to perform tasks and then the task occurs, even if it's only, say, you know, 90 times out of, 95 times out of 100, it's enough consistency of behavior that they're learning to trust. Okay, they start to trust these agents. And I'm seeing this all around me, engineers, product people, but also folks who have nothing to do with technology, where that trust then bridges over and they start to anthropomorphize the agent. They start to actually build a relationship with the agent, which actually, interestingly, I think goes back to compassion. I think we're wired, if we're actually honest, we're wired to have empathy for things that we trust. And so that builds a connection. So I wonder, as you're trying to open up the world and you're trying to make agents available to the world, okay, so we've got compassion. Good. We're making connections. We've got trust. They're working. We're making connections there. Okay, what about cost? Like, how do we actually get these things into people's hands without it blowing up on them and being inaccessible again?
Yeah, and I would say that's actually the flip side of hallucinations, because hallucinations are, like you said, great for creativity, for giving agents a personality, to getting you like in if the foot in the door. Like you don't want the same outcome every single time, especially if you are again building for creativity. But it doesn't also yield outcomes, business outcomes, or return of investment, because it's going to be costly. If you 9 times out of 10 get a subpar answer, it means that you're wasting tokens and you're wasting calls. So how do you make that right? That's the job of model providers from one side. A few years ago, frameworks were trying to mitigate hallucinations, then RAG. So we're trying to stick a ton of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, and none of this has been the definite answer to the problem of hallucination. So when it comes to cost as well, all you have to do is really make sure that you factor the so-called like total cost of ownership of your AI stack. Before Toolhouse, it will cost you at least $1 million a year to set up the entire stack, from the infrastructure to training to tagging, the data pipeline, the team. That was the ballpark. Like nobody could afford that, obviously. So to bring that down, you need to rethink the stack, and doing it in a not in a cheaper way, but in a more efficient way. And to be honest, like China is kind of leading the way in that, as much as politically charged the topic may be, but we are in this hybrid cold war, or like a space race in a way. This is the same as the moon landing, the US trying to go to the moon, this moon being AI. And they do it with the go big or go home attitudes, massive data centers, massive investments, massive costs as well. Then China comes very humbly. They started with embargoes on the same GPUs that the Americans could have access to. So they needed to make lemonade with lemons. So life gave them lemons, they found a way, and so they built this very very efficient LLM that's almost on par with Anthropic. Like I use it daily, and it has like great results. Like I ditched Cloud Code for Quen, and it
I
costs
mean, this is,
much less. So you need to rethink the way you do stuff, and that's what we're doing internally at Toolhouse. Obviously, I won't give you the secret recipe for our lemonade, but there are things that happen that we're doing differently, and the results are under everybody's eyes.
I think you're also calling out the constraint often creates creativity and solutions, which we all know. And I think one of the things I'm kind of driving towards here is that question about um, trade-offs for access. There are rational trade-offs to be made where, by creating small changes in the cost structure or the usage structure, and maybe those trade-offs are trading trust. Maybe those trade-offs trade, I'll put in quotes, perfection, because it's not really a thing, but regardless, whatever perfection would be, um, it might be able to multiply 10x the access to the same tool. And so then it becomes a very interesting question as folks building, at least I think you also think similarly, but I don't know. Feel free to push back. But my first thought is about people, not about the nations. So access is actually very important to me. do people gain access to these tools? Can we open them up to people? Because democratizing access to agents in particular, I think is important as we look forward to, you know, you talked about possible job displacement. Yes, that's a problem. But if we also put these tools into people's hands, there will be, um, I think, inherently innovation and maybe a more human approach to the displacement. Maybe we find that if if um, if it's too many steps removed as these agents are being built, maybe there's less connection to the actual human who's
Yeah.
on the other side being affected. But if you actually put the tools in the human's hands and say, hey, let's figure out how to improve the job, maybe the displacement shifts. Maybe we don't see the same kind of displacement because you've moved where the innovation's happening. But that doesn't work unless you can move the cost structure down enough to actually put it into people's hands. So I'm curious, do you think it's rational as you're thinking about Toolhouse? And I'm not asking for secret sauce, but as you're thinking about Toolhouse, do you think it's rational to give people that option to make that kind of trade-off as they're building agents?
Yeah, that's the massive challenge right there, and it's been done in the past. So I don't think there's even, my opinion that counts, or my vision of the world. Obviously, my vision of the world is to reshape the global economy so that everybody can have access to agents. And if you can get access to a job, you can create your own business and you contribute back to the economy that way, because it's an economy at the point it will become an economy of businesses that will trade services one another, and the value there is not the technology anymore, it's the trust, it's this soft skills, it's what you the community, what the brand. That's how CPG works right now. Like you purchase Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Red Bull based on the fact that it gives you wings, or you see it at a football match. It's exactly the same. So, but it's the same recipe. So the same thing is going to happen to businesses today, and cost is going to be a huge part of accessibility. And I'll tell you, like, the data points in the past. Like, I'm a huge history buff when it comes to technology, and I also lived. I was privileged enough to live some of those like pivotal changes in the industry, like when I was a Meta pre-IPO to post-IPO. So I saw the world change there. Um, like the WhatsApp acquisition. Why did Meta, who had Facebook Messenger, which is still something that's happening today, had the need to acquire this 13 employee company called WhatsApp for $19 billion? What did he see? At the time we thought Mark Zuckerberg was crazy, but there was a very interesting data point there. At the time, Messenger was competing against iMessage, Viber, and a lot of other like national players, and KakaoTalk, Line in Korea. So they they were noticing one thing, that when you're in a market that has more spending power, you don't care about data costs. We have unlimited data plans. We can afford that. We can afford Verizon, AT&T, and so on. Not all the world works like this. There's, for example, South America, Europe. Data plans are not 120 or $80 a line. They're like $5, €5 a line. Mexico, you don't have a limited data, so you need to be very data savvy. Why did people spend time on WhatsApp? Because they were so gentle on the data. It was like very bare bone messaging service that would allow them to communicate with pretty much anybody else across the world, bypassing the text message rates, but also being very gentle, the limited data plan.
Interesting. Bypass the gatekeeper, but opening the
Accessibility.
door.
Again, accessibility. WhatsApp at the time cost only 99 cents worldwide. So it was like 99 euro cents, or 99 cents in US dollars. So whatever the equivalent was, it was very accessible to everybody. And WhatsApp made some money with that one-off subscription. And then, yeah, Facebook came in and was like, okay, people are paying this one-off rate. That's incredible. We'll never compete with that. We'll never know. We'll never understand how to make this cheaper. We'll never, understand money. Why? Because at that point they had shareholders that had the need to grow the stock, and so the investment is the cost of the investment. There's a cost in the investment. If the investor invests $1 million in you, they expect 100 in return, and that means that
Well,
your
which is
company,
understandable.
yeah, it's
It's
a
I agree
It
with the difficulty, but it's understandable that as an investment asset that you're looking for returns like that. That's a otherwise it's penny stock, right? Like you're competing with something that's so low you could just do it elsewhere and the money
Yeah,
would
no,
move
absolutely.
away.
But there are two ways of doing that. Like either you get as big as possible the market and you keep the prices down, or you restrict the market and you charge shit ton of money to just like a few, the Fortune
You,
500,
yeah.
the Fortune 50. Why is this list existing? It's just like market cap list. It's just a list of contract values. So when I go to an investor, and if Toolhouse was an enterprise play, then my milestone would have been to sell to 50 of the Fortune 500. Um, so that to me is inconceivable. Like this is a product for everybody. So I'm building with Toolhouse like a car. So and so is Entropic. So are my competition.
Mhm.
Except they're building a Lamborghini, they're building a Ferrari. I'm building a Toyota. It's a car. It's a legitimate car. It's a respectable car, very reputable, you know, affordable, reliable. That's what my customers are asking me to build. They're not asking me for the fancy car. And then if they want, they go on the aftermarket and plug their fancy exhaust or whatever accessories they want to put in. Like I make it as an open platform so everybody can plug in whatever extension they want. But that's basically the WhatsApp versus Messenger analogy here. Like I'm seeing myself as and seeing Toolhouse as the WhatsApp of AI.
I think that's fascinating. I think the Ford Model T is another good example of just it's straightforward. It had just enough functionality that anyone could use it. It was accessible and it revolutionized an entire, obviously, it catalyzed an entire industry. It also created standards as a side effect. But I think part of what's interesting here, and I don't want to get lost in the whole Sam Altman AGI. I really don't want to get into that world. But one thing that I think is interesting, as much as he does not acknowledge ChatGPT, I mean, of course, it's done very well for him. He's all about the AGI and whatnot. The access to ChatGPT sort of like it was like a pre-flight. Suddenly everyone had this opportunity to get a small interaction, a small opportunity to be exposed to the possibilities, and it gave it time to gestate. And now I'm seeing more and more people ready to take the next step to try to harness this themselves. And there's a real hunger. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of these, various platforms showing up in places because now people are starting to think about, well, wait a moment, if this can do this, how can I automate? How can I take that next step? And we're seeing that everywhere. So I think we're facing this massive adoption curve. We're in sort of the flat part of the exponential curve, right? I mean, any exponential, it looks very flat for a while and then it just tips.
If you zoom out, yeah.
And yeah, it takes a little time because you don't know, we don't know exactly where we are on it. But from an adoption standpoint, I think what I hear you articulating makes a lot of sense, and that access I think is very real, very possible. I love the compassion connection. I do think there's a lot more to figure out on trust. Not that we're going to figure out on this podcast, but I think we're going to see that coming back and coming back and coming back as a question as people push the boundaries of what's possible and what task they attempt with the agents. And I think we're going to continually see this sort of interplay of I'm going to try this new task. Oh, it doesn't quite work. I shouldn't do it yet. Oh, maybe the models have improved. Maybe the way in which we think about the networks themselves or the way we think about the agent structures, maybe things like improvements to memory, improvements to tool access, interconnectivity. We're going to see all these change and expand what's possible. Um, but I'm actually really looking forward to the world in which lots and lots and lots of disparate people with very different worldviews start playing with agents and making agents of different kinds. I think we're going to be surprised about the kind of tools that start to show up.
I'm sure of one thing. There's no going back from AI. Just like there was no going back from the World Wide Web, from the internet. And a
Yeah,
lot of
there's no
people,
going dark.
yeah, a lot of people I read were very hesitant. I wasn't adult enough. I was probably like what 6, 8 when the dot-com bubble happened. Like it was very interesting to see, to be honest. And but so people resisted this kind of change for a lot. The same is happening with AI, except it's like now snowballing to the point that we all know AI is going to stay. It's going to change things for good. We're not going to see the effects in like tomorrow, but 5 years, this world is going to be completely different, completely. And that I guarantee you. Like then, yeah, every CEO will try to sell something to their investors and customers, and tell it's just a matter of time. Dario Amodei of Anthropic always says, "Yeah, we're 6 months away from having AI code 95% of all the code bases in the world." It's not happening, you know. That's just signaling because they need to add some pressure, some fear to in order to sell that. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to tell you, obviously, we have approached one single point where we know AI is going to be useful, which is agentic coding or vibe coding, as we like to call it. That is already unquestionable. Like we're automating a ton of tasks. We can't necessarily trust all of the agent's output for that, but still, what was done in weeks now it can be done in days, if not hours, and that's a massive uplift, and that's where AI is going to prove its own benefit, at least there. But there are so many other things in the current state that may not be addressed, and there are things just because of the nature of AI itself, large language models, and the architecture of those large language models that will not be addressed. A lot of data manipulation, for example, cannot be addressed, and that's why you see function calling, RAGs, vector search. Like the first version of agentic code editor would use RAG to look into the code, but that's not the right way because you don't need semantic context. You just need to do a grep. You need to define the replace, and that's how we're seeing AI overcoming the limitations. Like still, AI needs code in old shell commands to to perform an operation it cannot perform itself, and that's where we're going to see the next generation of AI having an edge. But that jury's still out for some use cases out there, and I think some use cases will never be addressed by the AI in its current state.
Well, and I agree, and I also believe that we have some responsibility, right? Like as we're helping grow this world, we have a responsibility to ensure that we're sort of aiming the things we're building in a direction so that people don't veer off into areas that'll be both dangerous to themselves and dangerous to all of us. On the flip side, giving people access to it also is a type of responsibility, and for sure not everyone believes in that. Some people believe that access should be limited, the access should be controlled only by a few. But I love this idea of what comes before. You don't just throw away the prior world, and we're figuring out that not every task is a task that should be a language model task. Some tasks, like you said, are grep, it's just search and replace. And some tasks are best performed by functions. I think one of the great examples of that, that I've seen early, people were doing a lot of agent orchestration via language model. But recently, I've seen a lot more bespoke agents, particularly bespoke agents, where the agent actually writes code for the orchestration. The orchestration runs as code. And then there's an agent that can update the code that does the orchestration. So it's not that the orchestration can't change, it does, it's dynamic, but it actually executes in a very programmatic, clear manner so you can actually trace it, understand it. That's not for everybody, but it's an example of how, there is this recursion. And I think that's part of the creativity of trying to figure out how to use these tools and how to make them accessible.
That's
So,
where we are right now. Basically, we're trying to figure out stuff. Just like what you were saying, when you look very closely, this exponential curve looks very flat. This is uncharted territory for everybody, and so we're trying to again stick solutions at the walls and see what happens.
absolutely. I'm very hopeful. I'm optimistic because I think that there's a lot. I'm hearing so many ideas. I'm seeing so
Good.
many different folks throwing in. And I love the fact that it's just such a vibrant. I think we're very fortunate because we've had
Yeah.
decades of startups in these different waves, whether it was .com, it was mobile. We've had these waves. And so we have the sort of innovation infrastructure to just see people try things and see how it goes. But we are definitely in builder phase. Like you can feel it. Maybe we're starting to exit build phase and we're starting to see more and more things make it their way to production. I know that there have been like everyone keeps referencing the MIT study, and what really struck me with this MIT study that talked about lack of ROI and whatnot was, and not to go back to trust, but it was a trust problem. You really, it's only if you trust something that you actually try to tackle a high value problem, and only typically the high value problems are the ones that actually give you ROI. So there was a bit of a creating prophecy there where, okay, if you're just experimenting, really what you're doing is you're building trust. And so I ironically took kind of the opposite lesson from that study. I took the lesson of, wow, look at all these folks who are building trust. 95% are building trust. Now let's see what they do next. And I think this is to your point of the next 5 years, we're going to see. We don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be
Ex-
changing.
Exactly. Like it's funny that you mentioned that because I also come from Europe, and there's no faith in technology. Like you always want to see a successful case study from your competitor first. Nobody wants to take the risk. Everybody's risk averse. And that's that kind of sounds stereotypical, but that's the hard reality of what it is, and that's why Europe really never really conquered the tech space, because here you're seeing in the US a side of the world where you have a ton of faith. You are willing to take a shot in the dark and see what happens. Then when it comes to and that's where like new businesses start up, grow up, and then become enterprises. And at that point, you reach some sort of like paralysis where you have grown so big that there are so many functions to probably automate. And when you have this new technology, it's not that you're hesitant, you can't move, you're paralyzed. So the 95% of those POCs not showing good ROI. Well, the story is twofold. The first is uh, there's just like any other technology shift, there's very little to right now, a little very, very brittle framework to that exists to measure return on investment. Return on investment over
Mm.
what? When you
Yeah.
replace your team with an agent, you don't even have a framework to understand the quality of the output from your humans. So you don't know how to measure this, and so you kind of backtrack the measurement or reverse engineer the measurement now that you need to compare and contrast, and that's why you don't see the return on investment, because actually your humans were good in the first place. And the second is scoping. So when you have large enterprises, you need to tend to assemble large groups of decision makers there. And everybody has their own agenda, obviously, because the company is so big. They don't do it on purpose. They don't want to tank this. They actually want to master AI because they know it's the future. But internally, there's always a clash. And we saw that first person as well. I saw that before with social media, when social media was new, like everybody had their own agenda. They wanted to add social media or remove social media from there was really a lot of wrangling to do within those meetings. This is what's happening today in AI all over again. So history here repeats 100% in a one fashion, like really mirroring what happened. And so that's also part of why those POCs fail, because at the end, when you actually define the scope is either so diluted or so abstract that you don't have a clear KPI that directly impacts the bottom line of the business, which means you had no return on investment. This problem is going to fix itself at some point, but not right now.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen, I think that's a really fantastic point. I've seen a reflection of it on the other side within Ocario, which is that um, you have to have clarity on your expectations for the agents. Otherwise, you don't have a way to measure them. And our whole job is to try to break them. So this concept of clear understanding of your situation, clear understanding of your outcome, so you can drive towards it. It's a precursor to ROI. To your point, you can't measure ROI if you don't know what you're measuring. And I think there's been this, maybe excuse is the wrong word. There's been this crutch of trusting the human to self-proclaim the value they've created. And I mean that somewhat abstractly, but we do in large enterprises, we end up having these teams that are chartered with a task. The team may be very successful, but it may not be the case that there's real clarity on the metric that the team is actually being driven from. And it doesn't mean the team's not successful. It just means that that's a discipline that we all strive for. It's a hard discipline to find, and we're all striving for it, and there are lots of mechanisms. But if you're going to go bring an agent into the equation, it's not a choice anymore. You have to figure that out. You have to know that. Otherwise, now here's where trust goes the other direction. You can't actually trust it fully because it's not aware. So you have to have that clarity. And what fascinates me that we're seeing is that it is not a developer problem. So sure, developers are building those agents. But this is a business stakeholder problem, and it's bringing business people, stakeholders, and others into the
Right.
conversation when they previously weren't. And I think that's really healthy. It brings, instead of technology for technology's sake, when I'm also an engineer by background, and I'm sure I've done it where I'm building things because it's fun to build. Bringing that other voice in creates orientation, it
There you
creates
go.
direction, it creates focus. I think it's going to be also very
Spot on.
beneficial.
Spot on. You like are nailing the problem. We're basically back to, remember the good old ROI calculator on the website for like any new SaaS that would come out. That's basically what we need right now. Again, that's why I'm laughing, because it's so funny. Like we're trying to reinvent the future, but actually end up reinventing the wheel instead. It's the insanity of all this. It feels like on a hamster wheel, just like doing the same thing all over again. There you go. But you hit the nail right on the head when you just like pinpointed the problem. It's a lack of measurement, lack of clarity when it comes to measurement. It's a discipline that certain teams, most teams have, some don't, and those are the ones who struggle to enter AI. And then also uh, there are conflicting priorities, like you also mentioned, where the business need to hit some goals, they have some targets. That's legitimate. That's where we're here to help with that. But then there's also internally developers or engineering. The engineering team is often motivated by their own uh, survival, I want to say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they ask for
Everyone is.
more resources. They want to do everything in house. They are asking for specific needs. When I directly had to witness this multiple times, and some companies I ended up being customers, and some companies I worked for, and some one of these companies when I built this proof of concept that would drastically improve some internal operations by turning weeks into minutes. I showed that to the CEO. The CEO had this holy crap kind of moment, brought pretty much all the leadership in, say, okay, this is the beginning of our AI transition. We need to build AI an AI strategy for us, because if this is the nugget, the proof of concept is yielding this result, can you imagine what we can do if the company becomes AI native? And so when we started to talk to engineering said, okay, we need to build our own AI pipeline and infrastructure. So we need to do inference, or we need to buy compute. We need to do data tagging, then training. Then we need to hire data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI ops, 3 engineers, 1 product manager. It's going to be 1.5 million just on year 0 to set up the team. It's like, that's not going to happen. But that's what the mentality of a CTO looks like, and that's where we struggle sometimes. They're going to become the slow movers there, the people like you mentioned, who like to build for the sake of building, and it's not going to happen. And we'll see this changing, because they will have to adapt in order to survive, and it's already happening. And I think it's a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know what? I actually find it incredibly heartening and optimistic to hear that a POC spurred an entire new way of thinking. That like a POC actually caused them to think differently and build differently, which means it's worth the time. It's not a loss. That the return on ROI was the entire company thinking differently about itself. So it means it was a
That's
success, even though the specific POC
totally.
was completely honest. I mean, it sounds like it was potentially irrelevant. It was a POC, but it changed the company, and
Yeah,
that's worth everything.
trust the company who offers you a POC, because that's very, especially when it's like very well scoped like that. You don't have to. It's a POC. It's a proof of concept. It answers the question: can we actually make it?
Can we do this?
Big time. Yes. So let's start with
And what's
something very,
possible?
yeah, very small. Move something that's not crucial to the business. You can get as close to the bottom line as you can, but don't blow it up. Try to make it small, and then expand from there. That to me is the key recipe. So POCs work when you really work hand in hand with the provider, with the company, with the product, with the technology that you are running the POC for. Obviously, can push POCs more than this, because that's basically The nice reality of Toolhouse, like companies before deciding whether or not to go on with AI, they come to Toolhouse because it's very easy to build agents. So they when they build an agent there, they click publish and they get an API in return. So they already have all the stack. The API is already built with RAG, memory, stateful interactions, like multi-user support, context management. There's everything, MCP. So they have the stack as a service that they can implement just with an API. So they can self-contain these POCs very quickly, and then they come and then stick. They come talking to us, and that's where larger contracts are born in Toolhouse.
Love it. I love it. More POCs. I think that's what we need in the world. Daniele, thank you so much for the conversation today. I think that's a perfect place to stop. What a wonderful conversation about the effect of AI in the world and culture and adoption and trust. Love it. Thank you very
Absolute
much.
pleasure. Thank you.
All right.